Bruce Willis, the Hollywood legend who turned pain into power and silence into strength. From a modest home in New Jersey, he rose to build a $250 million empire through grit, scars, and unshakable will. Once a bartender, he became the face of heroism, the man who taught us to bleed and smile with Die Hard, and to feel love even in loss with The Sixth Sense. Behind the fame stood a man quietly fighting his own battles. His Beverly Hills mansion and Idaho retreat, his Rolls-Royces and Porsche, all symbols of success, yet each carried the weight of sleepless nights and hidden bruises. Bruce Willis wasn't born a star. He forged himself in fire and pain, and in doing so became immortal. But this isn't a story about wealth. It's about the cost behind it. Behind the legend was a man who bled for every frame, walking barefoot across the broken glass of life. Not just in movies, but in reality. The applause often faded into a silence so deep he could hear himself disappearing beneath the weight of fame. It stole his laughter, his peace, his sleep, leaving only a man with tired eyes who gave more than he had to give. He smiled through heartbreak, fought through pain, and kept standing when his body begged to rest. And now, as the lights fade and his family guards his legacy, one can't help but grieve for the price of that greatness. If Bruce Willis ever made you believe in courage, if his strength ever made you feel less alone, leave a heart as a silent tribute to the man who never stopped fighting. It's almost impossible to imagine that the hero who once saved the world began in a house he couldn't even save himself from. His story began not in Hollywood's glow, but in the echoes of arguments that shook the thin walls of a rented home. Each time a train roared past, it felt as if the earth itself couldn't stay still for him. Bruce Willis was born on March 19, 1955, Nieder Oberstein, West Germany, a gray, war-torn town still learning how to breathe again. His father, David, an American soldier scarred by battles he never spoke of, and his mother, Marlene, a German woman trying to build warmth out of rationed hope. They were poor, restless, and one step away from breaking. Some nights the cold crept through cracked walls and clung to Bruce like another form of hunger. He remembered his mother's quiet sobs, the scraping of an empty pot, sounds that carved themselves into his soul. In 1957, when Bruce was just 2, the family left Germany chasing the American dream. But New Jersey offered no miracles. Their small house in Carney's Point was cramped and peeling, the air thick with factory smoke, a new beginning that still felt like survival. Money was a ghost that never stayed. His father's drinking blurred the days, his anger shattered the nights, and by Bruce's early teens, the family had fallen apart. When his father left, Bruce didn't cry. He just watched the red taillights fade into silence. As the eldest of 4, he became the quiet protector, cracking jokes to drown out the chaos, pressing his hands over his brother's ears when the shouting got too loud. But he couldn't escape the silence inside himself. He stuttered so badly that speaking felt like pain. "My mouth was full of cement," he once said. The day he froze while saying his name in class and heard his classmates laugh changed him. They called him Buck Buck. The name stuck like a scar. Rebellion came next. Fights, skipped classes, defiance. At 19, one bad choice forced him to face his reflection and realize how far he'd drifted. Beneath the anger was a boy desperate to prove he was more than the echoes of a broken home. Then, at 17, everything shifted. Standing under the spotlight of his school stage, trembling, something miraculous happened. The stutter disappeared. Words finally flowed. "That stutter was my first enemy," he later said, "and acting was how I beat it." For the first time, applause felt like freedom. Each role after that wasn't just performance, it was survival. The pain that once silenced him became the power that made him unstoppable. The boy from New Jersey didn't start unbreakable. He was broken first, and through those cracks the light found its way. Dreams aren't born in comfort. They rise from hunger, noise, and struggle. And for Bruce Willis, the next battlefield would be called New York. In 1973, at just 18, Bruce Willis left New Jersey with a suitcase, a half-eaten sandwich, and a dream louder than his hunger. He enrolled at Montclair State to study drama, but lectures couldn't compete with the urgency burning in his chest. I didn't have time to wait for life to happen, he'd say later. So he dropped out, boarded a bus to Manhattan, and walked straight into the cold. Hell's Kitchen was merciless. The radiator wheezed, wallpaper peeled, and the nights froze him to the bone. When rent ran out, he slept on friends' floors, his few belongings stuffed into a worn duffel. I wasn't homeless, he said, but I could smell what it felt like. Food was scarce. Sometimes dinner was stale bread or a can of beans split over 2 days. He took any work he could, factory guard, crate hauler, driver. But most nights he bartended. Behind the counter, he became Bruno, the confident alter ego who cracked jokes, poured whiskey, and played harmonica to keep the sadness away. Every night was practice, he said. I just didn't know what for. Auditions came and went. Rejection became his armor. The boy who once stuttered now learned to survive through rhythm and resilience. Those years didn't just test him, they carved him. Cold, hunger, and humiliation forged the armor that would make him unbreakable. Then came 1985, the storm he'd been waiting for. Inside a small LA casting room crowded with 3,000 hopefuls, he walked in scruffy, sleepless, and smiling. The producers didn't expect much until he spoke. The room went silent. The role of David Addison in Moonlighting wasn't written for him. It was waiting for him. When the show aired, it was lightning. Bruce was fast, funny, unpredictable. A rebel wrapped in charm. Within months, he went from broke bartender to Emmy winner. I waited my whole life for this, he said. And when it came, I didn't know how to breathe. Then came Die Hard in 1988, the film that changed everything. The studio doubted him. Critics mocked him. But Bruce stepped in, fought, bled, and redefined the modern action hero. John McClane wasn't a superhero, he was human. And audiences loved him for it. The movie earned $140 million and turned Willis into a $5 million a film phenomenon. But Hollywood always bites back. The 90s brought hits like Look Who's Talking and Death Becomes Her, and flops like Hudson Hawk and Color of Night. The press called him finished. He didn't argue. He just worked. Then Quentin Tarantino handed him Pulp Fiction in 1994. A washed-up boxer, not unlike Bruce himself. It revived his career and his fire. 5 years later, The Sixth Sense reminded the world of his depth. Quiet, haunted, and unforgettable. It grossed $672 million and silenced every critic. Yet behind the success, the grind was brutal. Over 100 films, sleepless nights, and whispered exhaustion. Every applause fades, he said, but the work stays. By the 2000s, his empire stood tall, $250 million strong, mansions in Beverly Hills and Idaho, but every dollar was a scar. Bruce Willis didn't just rise. He endured. He wasn't the strongest man in Hollywood, just the one who refused to fall. And then life wrote its cruelest script, of the kind that begins like a sunrise, began to fade. Bruce met Demi Moore in the late 80s, 2 stars colliding at full blaze. They married in 1987, raised 3 daughters, and became Hollywood's golden couple. But fame erodes love grain by grain. Long shoots, endless distance, laughter turned to silence. By 2000, after 13 years, they divorced. The silence was heavier than any line I ever forgot, Bruce said. Walking through the quiet house, he felt the ghosts of giggles, pancakes, and tiny footsteps. The hero who saved the world couldn't save his own home. Yet even in Heartbreak, he chose grace. Bruce and Demi stayed friends, co-parents, and allies. Proof that endings don't always mean destruction. Because through every storm, from frozen nights in Hell's Kitchen to the blinding lights of Hollywood, Bruce Willis stood tall, cracked but unbroken. He wasn't just an action hero. He was a man who learned how to survive before he ever learned how to win.